Welcome to the Human 5.0 Project, the podcast where we cut straight to the breakthroughs that matter, the show where science meets self-optimization. I'm your host, Ultimate Biohacker 10X, and here we break down the real research, real data, and real dosing behind modern biohacking, from compounds and peptides to techniques, devices, lifestyle strategies, and performance protocols. Most people jump in and jump out before they get the gold, so we're keeping it tight and delivering the essential insights you need without the fluff. If you've taken the time to hit play, we'll make sure you walk away with valuable knowledge that can transform your approach to longevity, health optimization, and beyond.
This episode is for educational purposes only. KPV is an investigational peptide and has no FDA-approved indications for human therapeutic use. Nothing here is medical advice. Always consult a licensed physician before considering any peptide, off-label compound, or experimental therapy. Side effects, drug interactions, dosing standards, and long-term safety are not fully established. Imagine a 3-amino acid peptide, smaller than most vitamins, that can turn down inflammatory signaling in a way that looks steroid level in certain lab models, without being a steroid and without directly manipulating your cortisol axis. That peptide exists. It's called KPV, lysine, proline, and valine. And in 2026, it's one of the most talked about quiet tools in the anti-inflammatory world. Today we go deep, where it came from, what the actual animal and cell data shows, what's known and not known in humans, and how it's being explored for gut, skin, immune balance, and how clinicians who use peptides talk about dosing with all the caution this deserves. Hey disruptors, biohackers, and timeline conquerors, this is Ultimate Biohacker 10X reloading the truth cannon once again. We're here to break the inflammation cycle, rebuild resilient bodies, and make every decade feel stronger than the last. This is the Human 5.0 Project, and today, KPV, the tiny tripeptide that's quietly crushing inflammation in 2026. KPV is not some random internet peptide. KPV is literally the C-terminal tripeptide of alpha-melanocyte-stimulating hormone, or alpha-MSH. In the scientific literature, it's often written exactly like that, alpha-MSH equals KPV. Now, alpha-MSH is a natural peptide hormone involved in pigmentation. That's the historical story, but decades of research also explored it as a powerful endogenous anti-inflammatory signal. And then researchers found something wild. The anti-inflammatory message of alpha-MSH could be carried by its last 3 amino acids, KPV, sometimes with effects that look partially independent of classic melanocortin receptor signaling in certain models. Translation: KPV is a tiny fragment, but it doesn't behave like a toy. It behaves like a biological signal. Let's talk mechanism, because this is where KPV gets its reputation. One of the strongest anchor papers here is a gastroenterology area line of work showing at very low concentrations, KPV can inhibit inflammatory signaling like NF-κB and MAP kinase pathways, and it reduces pro-inflammatory cytokines in cellular models. But the most important part, and the reason KPV is even in this conversation, is this. KPV can be taken up in the gut through a transporter called PEPT1. In a study, KPV's anti-inflammatory effects were linked to PEPT1 expressed in intestinal epithelial cells and immune cells. That matters because most peptides are destroyed in the digestive tract. As you know, oral bioavailability stinks for a lot of them. KPV is small enough that biology has built-in doorways for it, so when you hear people say KPV is different because oral can make sense, that's the scientific reason behind the statement. It's not a sales pitch. So let's look at gut IBD models, animal data. In preclinical models of colitis, including DSS and TNBS models, KPV has been reported to reduce inflammation markers and improve outcomes in mice. Important, animal colitis models are not the same thing as curing Crohn's or ulcerative colitis in humans. However, they are the reason that KPV is repeatedly discussed in the context of gut inflammation. Let's look at the antimicrobial angle, and here's the curveball. Alpha-melanocyte stimulating hormone peptides, including KPV, have also shown antimicrobial activity in lab testing against Staph aureus and Candida albicans. So KPV sits at an interesting crossroads. You have immune signaling, barrier tissue biology, and potential antimicrobial effects, at least in experimental contexts. Now the honest part. KPV is not an FDA-approved therapy. It's not an EMA-approved therapy either. It's not a mainstream hospital drug. Human evidence for KPV specifically is limited compared to the size of the buzz online. Most of the strongest work is preclinical, mechanistic, or early exploratory. That said, there is a broader interest in melanocortin-derived peptides, including derivatives like CKPV2, which has been studied for antifungal, anti-inflammatory activity in animal models. So the responsible 2026 summary is this: compelling mechanism and strong preclinical signals. Early translational interest, especially around barrier tissues and inflammation. But no, we proved it in large phase 3 human trials story yet. That's balanced, and that's real. Disclaimer again, the following is educational context drawn from reported research routes and commonly discussed clinician off-label peptide practice patterns. It is not a recommendation or a substitute for medical care because KPV is investigational and there is no universally accepted dosing standard. In the real world, people discuss KPV by route. Oral, such as capsules or enteric-coated forms. Why oral gets discussed? Well, because PEP-T1-mediated uptake is part of the scientific rationale. Commonly discussed ranges in peptide practice communities include hundreds of micrograms to low milligram daily totals, often split once or twice a day and adjusted based on symptom response and tolerance. There's also sublingual, such as a troche or a dissolvable, often discussed when people want to avoid GI variables. Commonly reported use is similar microgram to low milligram territory. We have subcutaneous or intramuscular, with obviously systemic intent. Clinician-style peptide discussions often land in the low microgram range per dose and used daily for a few weeks at a time or even a few times per week, spread out. And we have topical or skin-focused, and compounded topical discussions often refer to low percentages applied 1 to 2 times a day used for inflammatory skin issues or barrier support. How about some monitoring talk if someone's dosing this with a clinician? Symptom tracking, such as pain, bowel frequency, skin severity, sleep, inflammatory markers like HSCRP, sometimes a CBC or a CMP, and for IBD, specific fecal calprotectin depending on the case. Red flags and stop signs: worsening symptoms, allergic type reactions, unexpected infection patterns, severe GI changes, or anything systemic that feels wrong. Stop and talk to a clinician. There is no universally accepted dosing standard, and the ranges I'm about to share are not medical advice and not instructions. They reflect reported patterns I've seen discussed in experienced peptide practices and clinician-supervised settings. If anyone is considering peptides, that decision belongs in a licensed medical office with proper screening, contraindication review, and monitoring. Now, here are the commonly reported ranges. Oral capsules, enteric-coated or lysine salt. Maintenance, 250 to 500 micrograms once or twice a day. Acute flare, 500 to 1,000 micrograms 2 to 3 times a day for 7 to 14 days. Sublingual troche or dissolvable tablet, 500 micrograms to 1 milligram 1 to 2 times a day. This bypasses some first-pass metabolism. Subcutaneous or intramuscular injection, 200 to 500 micrograms a day or every other day, often discussed for more systemic intent. Topical cream or gel for acne, psoriasis, wounds, etc., 0.1 to 1% KPV compounded, applied 1 to 2 times a day. Cycle example often discussed clinically, 8 to 12 weeks on, 4 weeks off, and then reassess symptoms in labs. For example, HSCRP, and for IBD, again, fecal calprotectin if appropriate. And again, those ranges are context, not a prescription. Start with the fundamentals, escalate only when needed, and do it with medical supervision. What people are trying it for in 2026, investigationally: gut inflammation and IBD support conversations, inflammatory skin issues, histamine or mast cell type symptom patterns, post-viral inflammatory states. But here's the hierarchy I want you to remember. KPV is not where you start. The base pyramid still wins: sleep, protein, fiber, training, sunlight, stress regulation, and if needed, evidence-based medical care. KPV is a maybe tool that belongs in the category of interesting mechanism, promising preclinical data, limited human proof, and it requires caution. KPV is one of the most fascinating small signals in the peptide universe. There's no doubt about this. 3 amino acids with real mechanistic research behind it: inflammation pathway modulation, gut transporter uptake, and antimicrobial activity in lab contexts. But the responsible 2026 stance is promising, not proven; interesting, not a miracle; worth watching, and worth respecting. If you want a deeper follow-up episode, message me and I'll look at KPV versus BPC 157 versus melanocortin analogs, gut protocols that start with lifestyle and only escalate when necessary, or maybe how to read a peptide claim without getting played by hype. We did something similar earlier in the week. Drop your biggest inflammation struggle in the comments: gut, skin, joints, systemic fatigue, whatever you can think of, and I'll build the next episode around what you're actually dealing with. For now, stay hacked, stay curious, stay biologically defiant, and I'm out.
Thanks for listening to the Human Upgrade Project. If you found value in today's episode, share it with someone who's ready to elevate their biology. Make sure to follow the show for weekly deep dives into peptides, protocols, devices, lifestyle strategies, and the science of high-performance longevity. Until next time, stay curious, stay optimized, and stay 10x.